This is Stand Up for the Truth, addressing important issues and topics affecting Christians across the nation.
Good morning, it's Crash Caudill along with Mary Danielson, and it's a fresh new podcast. John Haller is back, got lots to cover, so we're going to get underway here.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Just when I think it couldn't get any more chaotic out there, we get October. So we are going to jump in here right away. Scripture today is Psalm 57, 1-3. Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me, for my soul trusts in you, and in the shadow of your wings I will make my refuge until these calamities have passed by. I will cry out to God Most High, to God who performs all things for me. He shall send from heaven and save me. He reproaches the one who would swallow me up. Selah. God shall send forth his mercy and his truth. What a great passage in light of Israel today. Let's pray. Lord, your eyes run to and fro through the earth, and there is nothing hidden from you. We trust you, Lord, with all of these things that continue to bring distress to the nations. We rejoice that all things are in your hands. Help us to be mindful more and more of your grace and truth and seek your wisdom in all things. We lift up those who are suffering from the storm destruction, those who are grieving loss, and who are just lost, Lord, with nothing left, that you'd be providing and comforting, that those who are bringing the gospel would be strengthened and souls would be saved in spite of it all. We lift up John to you for the things that you have given him to do to build up the body and anticipate your return. Bless his loved ones with good health and continued grace and endurance in Jesus' name. Amen. Pastor, lawyer, and teacher known for his weekly prophecy updates, a trial lawyer for almost 40 years, John Haller serves as an elder at Fellowship Bible Chapel. His prophecy updates are available on the Fellowship Bible Chapel or FBC YouTube channel. Sometimes I get home from church a little bit earlier and I see John live on there, so I like to tune in and see what he's talking about. John, welcome back. It's down to checking the news every 30 seconds now for me. How about you?
It's hard to shut it off, the news. I mean, it's just like a flood.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit before we went on the air about North Carolina and like a flash flood down there. I've been watching the images down there, Mary, and it's just absolutely complete, total devastation in the area. There's no water, there's no phones, there's no power. People are, and I suspect that the death toll will go much higher. They haven't really begun body recovery operations. I think they're sort of involved in still trying to get people that are still alive. So I've heard a lot of horror stories about the smell from dead bodies that's kind of being overwhelming in certain areas. So I think we need to keep those people in prayers, and there's plenty of sites that you can go to donate, and it appears that the government response has been pretty pathetic.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Robert Malone has a Substack, and he has a story about what a friend of his is seeing there, even as she's just trying to get to work. It's absolutely terrifying. Like you said, she saw things that she can't ever unsee. Dead animals, dead people. That these are loved ones that people are looking for. These are missing people, or they believe are still missing, and it is absolutely heartbreaking. It's way worse than what we think it is. And we get up in the morning on a beautiful fall day, and boy, do we count our blessings, John. Just incredible. Let's get to. You'd want to say something?
Well, I was going to say. I mean, I know we were going to talk about this. I was just going through the NOAA Historical Archive website about the tracking of that storm. And I don't know if you've ever had Bill Koenig on your program, who wrote Eye to Eye.
Yeah.
And I would text with him, and it appears, I remember it was last Thursday, I think it was, a week ago, Pam said, wow, that storm that's coming up through the Gulf really intensified almost in the last hour. It went from like a category 1 to category 4. And then, of course, it went up through North Carolina, dropped, I've heard 3 feet of rain in parts of North Carolina. Of course, with the mountains, as you know, having been there, that's flash flooding and that type of thing. We have a family member who's a mayor of one of the larger towns in Western North Carolina. and they had devastating floods a few years ago, but that storm intensified, and I'm still tying it together, but I'm pretty sure it was about 45 minutes after Joe Biden stood at the podium in the UN and called for a two-state solution in Israel to divide the land of Israel.
Wow.
So that happens, as Bill in his book, Bill Koenig in his book Eye to Eye has said, that happens all the time. It's beyond question as to what's going on. So that's something to pay attention to as our leaders call for division in the land.
Yeah.
That's going to have consequences. The Denmark prime minister yesterday was calling, well, we need to have a two-state solution, and we need to send militias and military into the Middle East to enforce our two-state solution. And it's just insanity. Nobody in Israel, I don't think anybody on the Palestinian or Israeli side of this thinks it's going to work, but nevertheless, that doesn't stop the leaders of the world from insisting on something that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and to me, the way the U.S. views Israel as some little brother or a satellite nation or dependent, I don't know, that gets old real quick, and Israel is doing what it wants at this point, and I couldn't be happier about that. John,
I think that's exactly correct.
Yeah. I want to add one more quick thing to this area in North Carolina. There's a town there, a very small town, that it's been devastated by the hurricane, but it could severely disrupt the global supply chain for microchips and solar panels. It's in the Appalachian Mountains. It's the community of Spruce Pine. 2,000 people live there, but it is America's sole source of high-purity quartz. And they're underwater, and they're talking about how this could completely disrupt technology in the near future because it's the only place to get it. This is an NPR article. A tiny town just got slammed by Helene. It could massively disrupt the tech industry, and you add that dock worker strike to all this, and we're headed for some difficulties, economically speaking, very soon, John.
Major supply chain issues about the spruce pine issue. Actually, I found a guy, I cannot remember his name, on Facebook who's from Middletown, Ohio, and he's leading up relief efforts down there. And he just has dozens and dozens of videos, posts, and everything about what's going on. From what I've been able to determine, we have friends that live, if you go east of Asheville, you have a town called Bat Cave. Then you have a town of Chimney Rock. Then you have Lake Lure. I call it Lake Lure. I don't know if that's how they say it. And then a little bit to the north of that is Spruce Pine. My understanding is that Chimney Rock is completely gone, and as is Spruce Pine. The town is completely devastated and destroyed. And that'll have an impact on chip manufacturing. Now, I'm sure that they have a supply of it, but it's a very unique, pure silicon quartz that they use in these chips. It's interesting. I saw an article. This shows sort of when I talk about convergence, the convergence of competing ideas, because everybody wants AI and chips and electric cars and that type of thing. There's also a big lithium deposit in the area. I don't think it was in the area that was impacted by the storm. It's near Gastonia, North Carolina. But I was impacted by the storm a little bit, but not like Asheville. But, they said that, climate change is causing all of this problem. And this was a storm caused by climate change. And now we're running low on we may run out of the pure quartz that we need to make the chips that we need to run everything that we want to run. And so what they'll do is they can get quartz elsewhere. I mean, it's the most common element in the world, but it's not easily to extract. And then they have to refine it. If they have to refine it, that will result in more energy and carbon usage and that type of thing, which sort of goes against their climate change goals. So everybody's really kind of stuck right now. There's it's a convergence of events. And then you add to that, as you mentioned, the port strike, and we've got a big problem.
Yeah, we certainly do. China is the major producer of solar panels. in the world, and it relies heavily on these imports from spruce pine. And then the U.S. and China are in global competition for resources, for semiconductors, and make sure it's green technology. So they're kind of digging themselves into a hole with some of this. But some of this is just like you said, a perfect storm, no pun intended, actually, with so many things that it's going to be a domino effect of so many events. We have no idea how the rest of 2024 is going to play out, but I think it's going to be perilous, to say the least. John, let's talk about the Middle East here. I see that Jimmy Carter turned 100 this week, and the first president to reach that mark. But in terms of accomplishments, I have to wonder, Iran, does he have any thoughts, coherent thoughts on Iran these days, his own legacy in the Middle East? Does he follow it closely? I mean, Obama certainly built on Jimmy Carter's legacy, quote unquote.
Well, I'll just quote our mutual friend, Jim Fletcher. I saw his post on Facebook this morning about Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was one of the most anti-Semitic, anti-Israel presidents we've ever had. It was under his administration that the Ayatollah Khomeini was allowed to return to Iran and make it into the Islamic Republic of Iran. And remember, before that, under the Shah, now everybody, listen, I'm not saying the Shah was, perfect and that type of thing, but this is kind of an interesting issue in end times Bible prophecy, because we know that Persia is identified in a lot of these passages as being an enemy of Israel. But before 1979, Iran and Israel had pretty good relations under the Shah. That changed when Carter pushed this Iranian revolution. And let's be honest, I don't think that any president since then has done a very good job in dealing with the Iranian Islamic Republic issue. But Carter was the worst. I think Jim Fletcher made a great comment in his post yesterday or today. He only hopes that Jimmy Carter will live long enough to see the Crown Prince, the Shah's son, return as the Shah of Iran. And land in Tehran and take over. That could happen. I mean, I think we're sort of in this beginning stage of, this Bible prophecy stuff recirculates. It recapitulates. There's a earlier prophecy, but then there's a fulfillment. So we have the ram and goat prophecy in Daniel 8. And I think we're sort of on the verge of seeing that play out as a ram, the West attacking Iran. That would be sort of like Israel, the U.S., Europe, and that type of thing. So I'm not sure. I'm just saying I think people need to be sensitive to that prophecy sort of unfolding right in front of our eyes as we're seeing a lot of things beginning to unfold in front of our eyes. It's pretty incredible to watch.
It is very incredible. And if people are interested even in the pre-Shah history, I recently read a book on the Dulles brothers, John Foster and Allen, head of the CIA under Eisenhower. And the CIA took out Iran's democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, back in 1953, and put the Shah in. And so we're still paying geopolitically for all of that maneuverings. That's a very interesting story if people want to know the history of the CIA in the 50s and such. The books on the Dulles.
That was an incredible time. I had I can't remember who they were in the case, but I was talking to, there was a husband and wife. And she said, well, this is my second husband. My first husband was Iranian, and he took me to Iran in 1953. And right after the revolution. And she said, you're going down the street and you see bodies hanging from the light poles.
Wow.
As a statement to make. She said it was a level of cruelty that she never thought she would ever see in her life. But here's the country that she's going to live in. They've just gone through a revolution. So we sometimes in the West, we have a little bit of difficulty understanding the mindset of the Middle East. We don't do a very good job of figuring out what's going on. So anyway, that's so. And Iran is very unstable. I think I sent you a couple articles from the Jerusalem Post, Seth Frantzman, and then another man, I can't remember his name right at the minute. But we have this again, I talk about convergence and acceleration all the time. So again, I think this is another convergence area that why is Iran doing this now? I mean, do they have to do this right now? About 2 years ago, in the Tehran Times, of all places, that's an Iranian government-sponsored publication from Tehran, they had an article that said that Iran had just gone through, over the last decade, the most rapid decline in female fertility of any country in human history. Now, so that what does that mean? It means they're running out of people. And if they're going to, and these guys are all about the Ayatollahs and the mullahs in Iran and the people that run the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, they look long term. So they don't think in terms of what happens in the next election cycle like we do here in the United States. They think long term. How are we going to establish our legacy forever, in accordance with Allah's plan? But at the same time, they know that their country is in a very precarious position economically and now demographically. So I think that gives them the impetus and desire to do these things, which really play into Bible prophecy quite well. So I think we need to watch that. And by the way, China is also in a demographic decline. Russia's in a demographic decline. Putin was just putting in place some regulations this week, trying to build up his military. They're running out of men. They're running out of people because they're not having babies. And so now they're encouraging women to have babies. And in fact, they've banned anything that says women will have a good life if they don't have children. They're not even allowed to talk about that in Russia now. So all of these countries are seeing this. They have the long-term goal of establishing their historical significance and legacy, but they have the problem of running out of people.
Yeah.
So I think that is a thing that is going to play into all of these things in Bible prophecy unfolding in very rapid succession.
That's very interesting. I never would have thought of the global birth rate, which is dropping everywhere. Israel, wow, John, what a week. Getting revenge for Hezbollah's 40-year reign of terror, helping the West. They've done incredible things for the whole world, and the world doesn't necessarily want to acknowledge that. Gatestone had an article this week, Why Arabs Are Celebrating the Death of Nasrallah, and one Lebanese Christian journalist says Israel just made the whole Middle East happy tonight, and there are many more like that. Wow.
Well, it's interesting, Mary, that the celebrations. I was just interviewing friend Nicole from Jerusalem before we started talking, and she talked about the fact that one of the things that surprised her, and she lives in Jerusalem, and there's a significant Arab population in Jerusalem and in Israel proper, not in what we call the West Bank, which is really biblical Judea and Samaria. They call that the West Bank to kind of mask what it really is. By the way, it's interesting, if you go and dig out some of the maps from around the time of the Oslo Accords and you expand them in, it'll say West Bank, but sort of in a grade letters that'll say Judea and Samaria. I'll have to dig those out and use them in one of my updates. It's fascinating. But she was surprised that in Syria and Lebanon and even in Arab places within Israel, Arab populations, they were celebrating the death of Nasrallah because, and for example, in Syria, Nasrallah was responsible for the death of tens of thousands of Syrians.
Yeah.
As Iran saw weakness and they saw an opportunity after the revolution to push their Islamic revolution across what they call the Shia Crescent, all the way from Iran through Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. And they've been brutal in Lebanon. I mean, they've been no friend of the Christians there. Hezbollah effectively controls the government. What Israel did about a week and a half, I guess, was just, it's hard to remember how long ago it was. It was just last week.
Yeah, right.
A week ago Tuesday that we got the reports of the pagers exploding that Hezbollah used to communicate among its soldier apparatus. But I think it's more important to go back a little bit. Earlier this year, Nasrallah gave a speech, and buried in that speech was something that I think a lot of us missed. I'm pretty sure that Israeli intelligence said, "Oh, okay, now we know what to do." Nasrallah said in that speech, "Hey, guys in Hezbollah, stop using your cell phones. Put them in a metal box. Get rid of them. We're going to have to communicate in a different way." Mm-hmm. And so in this ingenious operation, which I talked with Olivier Melnick about this yesterday, and got one of the most vicious comments on YouTube that I have ever received on anything I've ever talked about how, oh, you evil Jew worshiping so-called evangelicals. I doubt that you're Christians, and Israel has nothing to do with anything, and that's all over. Go read your Bible. I mean, it was as vicious as anything I've ever seen.
Wow.
So sometimes that, okay, if you strike a nerve that big, that you're on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so Nasrallah said, get rid of the cell phones. And then Israel said, okay, we'll devise something to do. And so they came up with this plan to intercept the pagers that they knew Hezbollah was using. They have spies everywhere. In fact, in Iran recently, remember Ahmadinejad?
Oh, yeah.
The guy that we used to refer about, I'm into jihad or something like that is how we used to call him, remember his name.
We called him I can't get a job.
Yeah, well, he gave an interview last week, and he said, that Iran had put together a task force to find out and expose all of the Mossad agents that were operating in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the government structure in Iran. And they thought they were making progress until they discovered late in the process that the head of the task force was actually a Mossad agent. So it's sort of like, oh, well, you didn't do a very good job of vetting the people who were trying to out the people you were trying to out.
Right.
So wow. Israel devised this plan, get the pagers replaced. It appears that they replaced one of the batteries in the pager with a smaller battery, but about 20 grams of explosive. And so last week, I think it was last Tuesday, these pagers started exploding. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. It's hard to anyway.
Yeah,
maybe
I don't
2
remember
weeks
either.
Ago.
Yeah.
But these pagers started exploding. But if you've seen the videos of them, I'm sure, like, for example, there's a pretty well circulated video of a guy in a grocery store looking at vegetables and in the vegetable section, and his pager goes off and he falls down injured. But nobody, there's a lady standing 2 feet away from him, and she kind of looks over like something happened. I don't even think it damaged the apples in the bin there by where the guy was, or whatever it was in the bin by where he was standing. Mm-hmm. And so there were thousands of these. These were all individually set off, is my understanding. That wasn't a coordinated thing. They knew where these guys would be. It was targeted to the Hezbollah people. Now, look, there were some people who were killed who were not Hezbollah, and we're not, I don't like to see, I'm opposed to this, but I also understand that there's a thing called just war, and there's a law of war and that type of thing. And the people who get upset about Christians saying, well, this is what they deserved. Oh, how can you say that? You can't be a Christian. But listen, what do you think Jesus is going to do when he comes back? Have you read the book of Revelation? Have you read the prophecies in Ezekiel and Isaiah and Jeremiah about what's coming on the earth? Have you read Ezekiel chapter 9 about how God's judgment is enacted? In Ezekiel 9, the guy is told to go through, the slayers are told to go through the city and slay everyone, man, woman, and child. This is a picture of the judgment that's going to come upon the world in the end times. Right. And so it's hard for us in the West, and we've sort of equated Christian love with pacifism, and I'm not sure that that's exactly a biblical response. Yeah. So if you want to be a pacifist, that's that's fine. I know my father struggled with this, and he was involved in World War II. But suffice it to say that, so the next day they had funerals for the people killed in the pager attack, and the walkie-talkies started exploding. And I think more were killed that day than the day before. But the other thing that happened was a lot of the guys had picked up their pagers to look at them. And Nasrallah, who for months had been saying, we're doing this operation, we're doing this operation. And every time he said it, he said, we are blinding Israel. And that's a phrase in the Quran. We are blinding our enemy. So what happened? They were blinded. And, and these people will be a burden to their family for the rest of their life. They're not going to, they have, I've seen the pictures. They have no hands. They have no eyes. Wow. The Iranian ambassador lost an eye and had another one severely damaged. And why was the Iranian ambassador, why did he have a Hezbollah pager?
Yeah. Well, you got to ask yourself that. Oh, absolutely.
Because Iran is controlling things. So then they said, well, we have to meet in person. So we can't do in Iran. They said stop using your electronic communication devices. So now you've interrupted the flow of communication. So Hezbollah said, well, we'll meet in person. But what Israel had done was they attract all the people who'd gone to the hospital, and now they know who all is involved in Hezbollah even better than they did before. Wow. And they have an in-person meeting of the Al Radwan Brigade, which is trying to plan a attack from the southern tunnels across into the Galilee region, just like they did in Gaza. And that was that operation. They said they had a big meeting. All of the top commanders were there, including some of the people for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And Israel hit it with a missile or bomb and took out the entire upper structure of the Hezbollah leadership. Wow. And I don't know if we have a break coming up, but Nasrallah then gave a speech, and he said, Israel, there is a day of reckoning coming for you. And then what happened? He had a meeting. Israel came in with 83 or 85 tons of bombs, took out the building, and killed Nasrallah. It was you have to, if you piece this together, this operation that took place by Israel against Hezbollah and Iran recently, it was the most sophisticated, technologically oriented operation in the military history of humanity.
Wow. Yeah. Only Israel. A lot of people are saying only Israel could do this. And I think, well, you know what? I'm going to save what I was going to say next because we have to take a hard break. We are speaking to John Haller today. Always a lot of insights and headlines to go through, and we barely are able to make a dent with what is going on here. But we're talking to John today on Stand Up for the Truth. And we are going to be back in 2 minutes with more. I want to talk more about Iran. There's an invoice coming due. Israel, I'm going to ask John, is Israel going to go after Iran? Is it going to be even more shocking than what we've experienced in the last few days? I want to ask him about, does Hezbollah still exist? Does it still have teeth? I can't see how, but we're going to see what he thinks about that. And also, tease a headline here, spreading around social media, Israel lobbing missiles into Syria overnight, and that they hit a Russian weapons depot, and we're having a hard time finding out if that's true, but I'm going to ask John that when we come back in 2 minutes. So stay with me, and we'll be back with more of Stand Up for the Truth very shortly.
Join Mary and the Q90 FM staff for Q Drive 2024, this October 21st through the 24th. Q90fm.com/pledge.
Feedback, questions, and topic suggestions are always appreciated. Email us at comments@standupforthetruth.com.
Welcome back to Stand Up for the Truth for this Thursday. Sort of a wild and crazy October so far, or actually fall. And we're talking to John Haller today. And we were talking right before the break, John, about a lot of people in the church saying, why are we promoting this war? Why are we happy that Israel's taking out their enemies? But we also have to understand, this article here says, by seeking victory, Israel turns Washington worldview upside down. Diplomacy and appeasement and containment has been this country's policy for so long. And he says there's no underestimating the shock being felt in the State Department, the National Security Council, and liberal think tanks, as Israel's offensive against Hezbollah has not immediately resulted in a disaster for the Jewish state and Netanyahu. The Biden-Harris team, its disgraced special envoy to Iran, Robert Malley, and its special envoy to Lebanon spent the last 4 years working hard to appease both Iran and Hezbollah. And here we are, John. Israel is doing what they need to do, which they should, but I think it's affecting our worldview on what we think the value of actual war is in taking enemies out. So I wanted to throw that out at you because the government has certainly promoted this mentality for a very long time.
Yeah, look, I mean, look, this has been an all of government approach in the foreign policy elite establishment for a very long time, even back into the Reagan administration. I mean, look, Reagan's Secretary of State, James Baker, was no friend of Israel.
Right.
And you have and so these people have envisioned that, well, if we just appease Iran, there will be a problem. And I was mentioning earlier, article in the Jerusalem Post, Seth Frantzman had one, and then another guy who I can't remember again, said that Iran's really kind of running out of money. They got that big amount of money from the Obama administration in the last days of the Obama administration, including billions and billions of dollars, pallets of cash were delivered. The Biden administration has Trump put sanctions back on Iran, and that was really kept them at bay for years. But then the Biden administration let those sanctions lessen or weaken, and then also allowed Iran to start selling oil mainly to China. And so they went from selling maybe 200,000 barrels of oil a day to selling 3 million barrels a day. So you can imagine the economic impact that has on the Iranian regime and what they're allowed to do. But with them funding, militias in Iran and Syria and Lebanon and the missiles and all this stuff. That's why they're selling drones and missiles to Russia, because they need the money. But they're sort of down, at least the analysis of this guy in the Jerusalem Post was, they're down to like their last 10 billion. That's not going to last long today. So that may explain why when Israel took out Hania in Tehran in an Iranian Revolutionary Guard facility, the political head of Hamas, a couple months ago, I think it was around April the 1st or so, somewhere in that time frame. No, it was since then. And then they also took out a major Hezbollah leader the day before in Beirut. That was so the response of Iran to that has been relatively muted. Even back in April, when they sent hundreds of missiles and drones in, there's very little damage to Israel. So the response of the Iranians has been fairly muted. And the other day, just a couple of days ago, my Red Alert app started going off. I mean, it was draining the battery on my phone on Tuesday.
Wow.
And if you go to the different Red Alert apps, I use one called Zofar, like Shofar, Tzofar. You can get it on the App Store. And you can set it so it doesn't ding every time there's a miss, because it goes off all the time.
Right.
I mean, for the last 2-3 weeks, it's a constant thing. But then on Tuesday, there were 2 huge attacks. One, the warnings covered the entire nation of Israel, and 10 million people headed to the bomb shelters. So, and this is part of the problem that Israel has right now, is Hezbollah has been attacking with missiles from the north. They've effectively shrunk the livable territory of Israel. There are about 400 communities, towns, villages, cities along the Israel-Lebanon border that have been totally evacuated. Tablet Magazine had an article recently about the last man in Metula. PM and I, my wife and I, drove across that border back in 2017, all the way from Majel Shams all the way over to Nahariya on the Mediterranean coast, to kind of get an idea of the lay of the land. And you're driving along the road, and like right on the other side are Hezbollah flags and installations and that type of thing. And so it's very close. But all those communities are gone now. The people don't live there. They're large. A lot of them have, I'm going to guess 50% of all the buildings up there have been destroyed in these rocket attacks that Hezbollah has engaged in since October 8th. And I never see people in the media ask, what about, is it okay for Hezbollah to be launching missiles, rockets, mortars, and everything into Israel? Nobody ever asked that question. So Israel, the goal of the war now that they're launched into some special operations into Lebanon, 8 Israeli soldiers were killed yesterday in Lebanon, young guys. They are trying to get that area back so people can return home. On the other hand, the goal of Hezbollah and Iran is to shrink Israel further. And back in February, there was a giant poster at Palestinian Square in Tehran. And so whereas Israel has, let's say, 80,000 people evacuated from the north now, in Hebrew, the missiles that were on the poster in Palestinian Square in Tehran, giant building-sized poster, said, are you ready for 2 million displaced people in the north? So as you watch the attacks over the last couple of weeks, they're going further down into the Galilee. And so they figure, well, we've got them to leave these communities along the border. So now we're going to get them to leave these communities down in the Galilee, and we're shrinking Israel. Now, my opinion is Israel, okay, I would say, look, everything that you do now, I'm not in charge of much of anything. So, but if I was in charge, my inclination would be, okay, you want to shrink our country? Every time you make anybody evacuate from the north, we're taking 10 times that amount of land from the area of the West Bank and making settlements in it.
Oh.
And I think that's you really have to engage in a very severe tit for tat in this region of the world. And the Arab world will respect the strong horse. We in the West don't understand this, but that's how this whole thing works. So as long as Israel acts strong and takes action, they will actually get respect in the Arab world. And of course, all the pro-Palestinian so-called Christians in America will, have a hissy fit about it. But this is war. I mean, this is war. These people have avowed. In fact, the Ayatollah said yesterday in Tehran, this is about getting rid of America too. It's not just getting rid of Israel, it's getting rid of America.
Wow.
And how many of their Hezbollah types and Hamas types have come across our border under she called herself the border czar at one point, but now, the propaganda gaslighting is going on that Kamala Harris was not the border czar. She was just sort of helping out a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the amazing thing in this age that we live in is they constantly gaslight us about everything.
Oh, yeah. They absolutely do. It is unbelievable. And you got to really be smart, and you got to see through all the lies, and it's coming from everywhere.
So I would really expect in the next few days, and remember, everything in the Middle East they do things on significant days. So last year, October 7th happened on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War and on a Jewish high holy day. Today is the first day of Rosh Hashanah. It started at sundown last night, the Feast of Trumpets, and that will continue over the next 10 days to Yom Kippur, which I think is on October the 12th. So this is the high holy days of Israel.
Right.
And I just expect, I don't know if Iran will do something on the anniversary of October 7th or Israel will, but I think you would be wise to pay particular attention on Monday, October 7th. I think something's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I was going to ask you, is Iran going to get an invoice for this week's barrage? And I know they're saying that there will be revenge. We just have to watch. We don't know. Do you have any thoughts about this thing spreading around social media and mostly the international news sites? Israel lobbed missiles into Syria overnight and hit a Russian weapons depot. In fact, they were bombing or lobbing missiles for almost an hour. and I can't find anyone in the States that's talking about this.
I did talk to my friend in Jerusalem, and I did ask her that question because I got your email while I was interviewing her.
Oh.
And I think that it did happen. She had heard that it did happen. But the one thing that you always have to be careful about when we're getting these posts from on Twitter and elsewhere about the Middle East is the first question you should ask, okay, did it really happen? And is it accurately describing it? So, for example, in the Iranian attack the other day, 180 ballistic missiles sit in one barrage. It was the largest ballistic missile barrage by one country against another in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
This was the big, I mean, we think, well, certainly in World War I or World War II. Well, no, they didn't really have much in the way of ballistic missiles in World War I. Certainly not World War I and not many in World War II. This was the biggest one in history. And I was getting videos of, these things coming through. So then you had these people posting, and they have a lot of pro-Iranian, pro-Russian bots that just post a lot of propaganda.
Yeah.
And so they said the Nevatim Air Force Base in southern Israel in the Negev was destroyed. And well, that's where Israel has about half of the F-38, F-35 fighter jets that they've enhanced way beyond anything that we even have in the United States. And they've used them in these attacks down into Yemen and elsewhere. They attacked the port in Yemen. They've destroyed this port twice and the power plants down there. Yemen is back in the Stone Age. We think that the people in North Carolina don't have power. I don't think the country of Yemen has power now.
Wow.
But the reason why Israel does that is that's a long flight for an F-35. It has to be refueled. It can't fly there and back. So, if you send the plane there, you want it to come back, right? So they have to refuel it, but it's sending a message to Tehran. Listen, it's further to Yemen than it is to where you guys are. You and Iran, you don't really have an air force, and we've already taken out some of your sophisticated air defenses, so we can attack you at will. That's the message that Israel is sending to Iran. So when you see these videos, though, of the base being destroyed, the first question you have to ask is, wait a minute, did that really happen?
Yep.
And so I've talked to a lot of people in Israel over the last 2 days. We're not aware. There was a hangar that was hit. There were some other things that happened. But understand that they're taking the way the anti-missile system works in Israel and then using it for propaganda purposes. So what happens is when a missile is launched, so these ballistic missiles, unlike a drone, which takes hours to get from Iran to Israel, and they fly much slower, so they're easier to shoot down. These ballistic missiles travel at very high speeds, and they get from Iran, where they're launched, to Israel in 12 minutes. So the whole country, when the sirens start going off, these missiles are going to be landing in 12 minutes. So the missile system analyzes where the missiles are going to go and where they're going to land. And then they have algorithms and, I'm sure artificial intelligence and everything. And it says this missile is going to land in an open field. Don't waste a expensive $50,000 or $100,000 Arrow 3 missile or David Sling missile to shoot that thing down.
Right.
Just let it land and blow up. And so a lot of these landed and blew up, didn't really cause much in the way of damage. Sometimes they even say, look, that's going to hit a school, but that school's unoccupied right now.
Okay.
And in this whole attack, only one person, only one casualty, only one injury. And you understand, 10 million people went to bomb shelters, 180 ballistic missiles were launched, and only one casualty all over the whole of Israel.
Yeah.
And that happened, I believe it was an Arrow missile hit an incoming ballistic missile. And these things are really big. I mean, they're several stories tall. The missile fell on an Arab guy in Jericho and killed him. There's a security camera of it. But on social media, all the Iranian people, all the Jew-hating people, all the Candace Owens types are like, oh, look at the glorious victory that Iran. Now, I don't think Candace Owens said that, to be fair to her, but her comments, she's turned into a radical anti-Semite. I think that's pretty clear. Yeah. It's stunning to watch. We hope that it's a mental breakdown that she's having that's causing this, but I'm afraid that it might actually be what she now believes. But so the propaganda is, oh, glorious victory for Iran, but life in Jerusalem is normal today. Life all over Israel is normal today. And the people did what they were supposed to do. They went to their bomb shelters and nothing happened. Now, there was a terrorist attack in Tel Aviv the other night in Jaffa, the biblical port of Jaffa where Jonah sailed from. Guy, I don't know if two guys got off the tram, and went down the street and killed about, it was either 6 or 8 people in a terrorist attack. Oh, and by the way, do you remember back in 2003 when they had a couple of Israeli guys had wandered into Ramallah and they were kidnapped?
Yeah.
They were tortured, mutilated, their internal organs were paraded through town. And you remember the guys standing in the window holding up their bloody hands?
Yeah.
That guy was killed in a strike in Gaza yesterday.
I heard that. Were these two gentlemen reservists in the IDF?
I believe they were back in 2003.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's just a matter of time.
But that whole West Bank, Judea, Samaria area, that's on the verge of exploding. I mean, Israel's conducted massive operations against terror cells there. Even my friends in Israel who would normally go into those areas, like towns like Hebron and Jenin and Nablus, which I've been in myself. I've been in many of those places myself. They say we won't go there now.
Yeah. Wow.
I had an Orthodox Jewish friend. I was actually in their home for Shabbat a year and a half ago. Very interesting evening. They're Orthodox Jewish, Zionists. They moved to Israel because they believe that this is where the Jewish people belong. She made a very interesting post on her Twitter account the other day, and she said, pray for us. We've got a lot of operations, but pray that we will be able to go where we want to go. Now, I think she meant that two ways. One, Israel should continue to be this, economic, technological powerhouse. But I think she also meant that we want to go places in Israel where our heritage is that we're prohibited by law from going. To me, it's a scandal that a Jewish person can't go to Shem or Shechem in Nablus. They're not allowed to do it. They're not allowed to go in places in Hebron that are where Mamre, for example, where Abraham got the promise of a son, visited by the Lord and 2 angels by the oaks of Mamre. You can go there today, but it's not in an area that Israelis are generally allowed to go. Yeah. And I just think it's a scandal. And so I think when my friend put that post up, she was thinking that at the end of this, we want to be able to go where we should be able to go in this land.
Sure.
And has a very heavy prophetic component to it, in my estimation.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Wow. So much going on there. And I think that we're kind of winding down a little bit here. Not a lot of time left, but I want to get a soundbite from you, John. I know this is switching gears here, but I want a soundbite from you on this Pact of the Future in the UN. And, everyone slept through that. Given the incompetence of the UN in general, since their founding, people might be thinking, well, this has no teeth. But I think we might find the answer to that next time there's a global crisis and the UN takes over the driver's seat. Makes me wonder about things like what happened in Western North Carolina. Are we going to find DEI and climate change rules imposed on the rebuilding of places? And do you feel that Pact for the Future has teeth? I haven't gotten an answer that I'm satisfied with from various people that I do read and look to for this information. What are your thoughts on that?
So, well, I did a conference last weekend in Brookville, Ohio, and one of the speakers was Patrick Wood.
Oh,
so
sure.
Patrick and his wife Charmaine stayed at our house for 4 days.
Nice.
And so Patrick and I had a lot of time to talk about this. And Patrick has a thing called technocracy.news. You should
we've had
subscribe,
him on.
follow that. Yeah. He is really on the cutting edge of this. And we talked about the Pact for the Future. He brought it up, this technocracy aspect of this coming beast kingdom of the Antichrist, I think needs to be looked at very closely by the church.
Okay.
This week, Sam Altman from OpenAI had a blog post on his blog called The Age of Intelligence.
Yeah, I read it.
And he says we're going to have artificial superintelligence. This was what Joel Allen said about it at his blog, Singularity Weekly. You can get that at joebot.xyz. Good guy, solid thinker, but he said this: priests of the cyborg theocracy speak of superhuman intelligence so often it's almost banal. Every new gadget appears to them as a prophecy fulfilled, as if artificial intelligence will be the second coming of Christ, although I doubt these guys believe in the first coming. Right. And so Altman said, we're going to have super intelligence in a few thousand days. Now, he's given himself some wiggle room there. But understand, I was in Jerusalem at the Media Summit. They were excited in Israel. They had a business guy there, Jonathan Medved. You can find the video on YouTube. And I'm sitting there, and we may have talked about this before, and he was talking about artificial intelligence and the recent release ChatGPT and how this was going, and the Abraham Accords and the economic component. And he said, we're going to do amazing things in medicine. And then he said this is the exact phrase: we will make the lame walk. Now, I will tell you, sitting there as a Christian in Jerusalem, I immediately thought of the passage in John, where John the Baptist sends his disciples to Jesus saying, are you the one? Are you the Moshiach? Are you the Messiah? Or should we look for another? And Jesus says, you go back and you tell John what you have seen. The lame walk, the blind see, the deaf hear. And that's the same order that Neuralink used in their rollout video. People will be able to walk, people will be able to see, and the deaf will be able to hear, all through artificial intelligence, technology, and that type of thing. So I think that we're very, very, we're on the wrong track if we're dismissive of what's going on in this particular space. The Pact for the Future, that type of thing. Joe Allen's article is called Faith-Based Futurism. Do you believe in digital deities? And and I think that's right. I mean, the AI race is on. They're doing it. They're going into weapons and bioweapons. I think I sent you some articles out of the Financial Times. And Sam Altman at OpenAI, who's now telling everybody, only invest in us, don't invest in anybody else. And these technology writers are saying, wait a minute, they're going to get into microbes and biological weapons and that type of thing. We need to have safety built into this. Well, guess what happened at OpenAI? Sam Altman got rid of his safety team. Yet he's moving forward, and there's a lot going on in the digital space, the development of faster chips, perhaps quantum computing, and other things. And it is happening so quickly. And Patrick made a very good point in an interview with Tom Hughes, and he said, listen, when the Antichrist comes and he wants to roll out the beast system, he's not going to do the abomination of desolation and then sit down with the false prophet and say, okay, how can we control humanity? We should crowdfund a technological system to allow us to do that. No, that's not what's going to happen. He's going to say, okay, it's time to flip the switch.
Yep. Wow.
because everything will be in place and everything is being put in place, and people really need to pay attention.
Yeah, boy, they certainly do. So much going on with AI. There was early talk about guardrails being put up. I think that's just been put in the dumpster. And this article talks about environmental, social, and geopolitical intelligence. It sounds like jibber jabber, word salad 2.0, but it really, words have meaning. John Hallers, thank you so much. There is a lot
Thank you, Mary.
that we could have continued to cover, but I know you're super busy this time of year, and especially this fall. It's just been crazy. So Lord bless you, John, and we'll do this again, hopefully before 2024 comes to a slam door. So thank you for joining me. J.B. Hickson tomorrow. We're looking forward to that. We're going to talk about how to spot false teachers and false teaching. So I'm looking forward to a real nice, meaty discussion with JB. So join me tomorrow.